A code enforcement officer went over this house and began taking pictures after complaints. The suspect greeted the code enforcement officer with this gun and threatened to kill him. A perimeter was set and the special response team was contacted.
Front door. He came out with a gun. He's at the front door. He's at the front door on the ground! On the front door on the ground!
All perimeter units, hold what you got.
Front door on the ground!
Doors open! Doors open! Hands where we can see him! Hands where we can see him! He's in the front door. Yeah, I see him. I got eyes on.
What isn't immediately apparent from the video is that the suspect did fire on the Bearcat as they approached. They returned fire, killing the suspect, who was later found deceased inside. If you'd like to support the channel, make sure you're doing that by feeding the algorithm down below and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. From this officer's body cam, you can see the suspect exiting the front door, and he actually makes it to the corner or around the corner of the garage, which is one of the main issues that I'm going to talk about here in a second. He's able to fire 3 rounds from the same gun at the Bearcat. 2 of those rounds strike the Bearcat. One of those rounds actually bounces off the driveway, goes underneath the Bearcat, and they later found that it impacted a yard across the street. The suspect had no criminal history, had no previous run-ins with law enforcement, and so my best guess and their best guess is that he probably had some mental health issues. As a general rule, you never want to shoot your weapon from a moving vehicle because there's just way too many variables that you can't possibly account for, and there's a good likelihood that doing so violates your own policy and in turn could terminate you from your job, which we want to avoid. But as both the driver and the person holding lethal coverage, you don't know what to expect because both of you are completing 2 different tasks. And so it's important that the person holding lethal coverage and the driver have some level of communication on, hey, if we take contact when we're rolling up to the objective, what are you going to do as the driver so I know what to expect as the person holding lethal coverage? Are we going to slow to a stop so that I can deal with the problem? Or are we going to continue on the pre-designated path? And do I need to maybe hold my fire because I know now that we're going to be hopping a curb to get into this person's driveway, changing elevation, and whether you're in an armored vehicle or you're in a regular vehicle, any type of movement in that vehicle is going to throw off your ability to be accurate. And so as a general rule, you should never do it. Although I'm not saying that they did anything wrong here. These are just considerations that you should have as both the person driving the vehicle and the person holding lethal coverage. This is a high-risk vehicle encounter. This is exactly what I teach in my class, which is not shooting from a moving vehicle, but it's being presented with a lethal threat as you are slowing to a stop or you having to come to a stop to deal with an immediate threat in or around your vehicle or even at a distance. This is part of the conversation that I have in that class because I don't want officers to think that they're going to be shooting from moving vehicles because, again, it's something that you should definitely not do. And I do expose them to a scenario where it's probably in their best interest to not abandon their vehicle in that moment and continue holding lethal coverage while advancing towards the suspect, right? So in a situation where you have no other options as far as cover goes, are you going to leave your vehicle and walk behind this person who is armed? Probably not a good idea. And so that drill or that scenario really reinforces the ability to be able to come to a stop or slow to a stop or work with you as the person holding lethal coverage and the driver, them working together to understand what it takes to actually put accurate rounds on the threat in those moments. If this officer is anything like you or me, then he's probably beating himself up over this performance, and I'm going to explain why the details matter. When I got into my shooting, one of the lessons that I learned, and one of the things that stuck with me for a long time, is the fact that I was going to get on my radio when it wasn't necessary because everybody that needed to know what's happening was there, and people were already seeing the thing that I was going to call out over the radio. And so what happened in that situation, like the short version, is I was coming around the back end of a vehicle and I had my gun like this, and I went to key up on my radio to unnecessarily talk about some things that were happening. And as I was doing that, I caught the suspect out of the corner of my eye, who was going to become my focus anyways, and I never got to key up on the radio. I had to immediately come down, and then I delivered one round to the guy who was drawing a gun on me and my team. And so looking back at the body camera, that was one of the lessons that I learned. I'm not gonna say that you should never be on the radio or the radio isn't important. It's absolutely, unequivocally important, and it is your lifeline. And so I'm not gonna say either that this special operations guy shouldn't be getting on the radio to tell people what's happening, because SWAT guys or special operations guys are really good at painting the picture for people that are arriving on scene, or when there is a reaction happening from the objective, telling people what's happening. And so the only thing that I will say is that if you are going to get on the radio, short, clear, and concise, and then you need to move to the next thing. There was probably 3 seconds, 4 seconds, I'm not sure exactly of the time.
We're going up.
Front door. He came out with a gun.
Shot fired.
But seconds matter, tenths of seconds matter. A person who has threatened somebody with a firearm now exiting the front of the house with a firearm towards your teammates is a threat of serious bodily injury or death, okay? And so when we look at time to the target, you have to start asking ourselves, what could we have done to deliver rounds to the suspect sooner so that we could have avoided him actually shooting at our guys? And so what this officer is probably thinking about are the things that I'm going to explain to you. I don't know why this officer is seen on body camera walking up to the position, right? That's where the body cam starts. I don't know if he had kind of been there for a while and he kind of walked back there and then kind of walked back. So it doesn't matter if you're at the position for a length of time. That's better because you have time to look at your position and look at the objective and kind of run scenarios through your head and actually get into the position that you want to be in when you see the thing that you need to deliver rounds to. And so because he's walking up right when the body camera starts and then pretty much immediately kind of like the threat happens, that compresses the amount of time you have to make a decision. But it doesn't mean that you can't still be in the place that you need to be when you need to be there, okay? So two different scenarios, right? If he's sitting there for a while and he is looking at the objective and he goes, okay, I can kind of see the garage door, maybe he can't, but he can see the front door, he can see the side windows. He knows that that's his responsibility, okay? So if anything happens, right, he is the person that needs to deal with that. And so he has a corner similar to this, right, that he's walking up to. And I talked about this in a previous video, some things that we're not going to do when we're staring at a structure with an unidentified suspect in an unidentified location. We're not going to stand here looking at the structure, right? We're going to minimize our exposure, and we're not going to be down in a supported position up over the hoods of our cars or up over the truck beds, sighted in on the house. One, you can't do that for a long period of time, but two, there's nothing for you to shoot at. You're just making yourself a bigger target. So you're going to do exactly what you saw him doing here in the beginning, which is minimizing your exposure to the threat area and waiting for a threat to present itself, or a person, or whatever it is that you now need to get into that position so you can be prepared to deliver rounds if that's what you need to do. The good thing about being in a position for a long period of time is you can start analyzing what is good cover, what isn't, or what is a stable position and what isn't. And you can actually take a moment, and you should at some point, to get into that position before it ever happens, just so you can make sure that that's a stable shooting platform. Maybe, you know, depending on what the barricade is that you're using or the wall, maybe you find that your light is kind of in the way here. So you're like, okay, I need to be back here. Yep, my muzzle's clear here. Okay, I'm good, right? Or no, my muzzle isn't clear. If I need to come up and take a shot, I need to be here. These are things that you want to know prior to. Just simply working around barricades at the range is good, and that can give you a pretty good idea, but you may be utilizing something that you don't normally use at the range, and that's why it's important just to take a second to verify while you have the time. And so this officer is saying, you know, hey, the door's coming open, he's coming out with a weapon, right? That's the time that we need to be engaging that person, okay? Because we don't want him to hurt our guys, and every round that he shoots at our guys could be him hurting somebody. And so I'm okay with saying front door is open or suspects coming out, whatever it is, but it has to be short, clear, and concise, but you have to already know that your next movement is down into the position, which in this case probably would have been that corner of that residence that he was standing at. And if that would have happened in the way in which I perceive it should have, you know, he's standing there, front door's coming open, and then you're engaging that person. And if that would have been done in that way, this individual never would have got any rounds off, and we would have shot less rounds at him, because there's a good chance that the first rounds we took on him probably would have been accurate, right? He's not shooting yet, we're not shooting at him, and there's a good chance if you hit him or you get good hits or you get hits in general, they're gonna react in some way, and we're gonna shoot less, we're gonna hit more often, and that's ultimately what we wanna try to do. But the most important thing is that in most situations, the priority when presented with a lethal threat is to put accurate rounds on that threat as quickly as possible. Absolutely, there's other circumstances or situations where maybe your gun's in your holster, and maybe the best thing to do is to actually move out of the way, right? Maybe you're standing in a threshold talking to somebody and somebody draws a gun from deep in the room. Are you gonna stand there and draw your gun? Probably not. You're probably gonna, first thing you're gonna do is probably move. One, that's probably the smartest thing to do, but two, that's what your brain is gonna force you to do anyways. But again, as a general rule, when a lethal threat presents itself as somebody who needs to be shot, we wanna reduce the amount of time it takes us to get to that threat.